The morning sun filtered softly through the tall, narrow windows of the small-town courtroom, casting long, golden beams across polished wooden benches. The room, usually reserved for quiet deliberations and measured arguments, buzzed with a subtle tension that only court proceedings could create. Lawyers rustled papers, officers adjusted uniforms, and the occasional cough echoed from spectators who had arrived early to secure a good seat. It was an ordinary Tuesday in the United States, a day that promised little drama beyond the usual legal matters. Yet, the air seemed charged with an invisible anticipation, though no one could pinpoint why. At the very back of the courtroom, perched on a worn wooden bench that had seen generations of visitors, sat a young mother and her daughter. The girl, only 3 years old, clutched a small stuffed rabbit tightly against her chest, her chubby fingers kneading its worn ears absent-mindedly. Her bright, curious eyes darted around the room, taking in the vast array of adults in suits, the polished mahogany of the judge's bench, and the occasional glint of sunlight reflecting off the brass nameplates. She hummed softly to herself, the kind of contented tune only a toddler could create, completely unaware of the formality surrounding her. Her mother, seated beside her, whispered softly, trying to entertain the child while also keeping her seated. "Stay still, honey," she murmured, glancing nervously at the stern-faced officers at the front of the room. The child's wide-eyed gaze flitted from one detail to another, absorbing every small movement, every subtle sound, the shuffling of papers, the soft tap of shoes on the floor, and even the faint, rhythmic breathing of those around her. At first, her mother had thought she would nap quietly during the hearing, as children often do when taken to places unfamiliar to them. But the little girl had other plans. Near the front of the courtroom, a police officer stood beside a large German shepherd, the kind of dog that carried both authority and an aura of calm discipline. The dog, named Rex, had been trained for years in the K-9 unit, handling everything from searches to public demonstrations. Today, he was present as part of a routine case involving community safety, a silent, watchful presence meant to remind everyone of the law's reach and the protection it offered. Rex sat obediently, his head high, ears perked and eyes focused, alert to every subtle cue from his handler. The officer gave him a gentle pat on the back, silently reinforcing the bond and trust between man and animal, a bond forged through discipline and respect. As the courtroom slowly filled with people, the little girl's curiosity grew. She wriggled in her seat, pointing to shiny objects on the walls and tapping at the brass handles of the doors with her tiny fingers. Spectators whispered to each other, chuckling quietly at her energy. She was clearly too young to understand the solemnity of the courtroom, but somehow, her presence had a way of making the room feel less intimidating, more human. In a space dominated by adult voices, legal jargon, and procedural seriousness, her small gestures stood out like a beacon of innocence. Then, without warning, the moment came that no one in that courtroom would forget. The girl's gaze landed firmly on Rex, the imposing German shepherd sitting so still it seemed almost statuesque. For a brief second, her expression shifted from mere curiosity to uncontainable excitement. Her little finger shot forward, trembling slightly as she pointed directly at the dog. "Doggy!" she exclaimed, her voice cutting through the subdued murmurs of the courtroom like a bell in a quiet hall. Heads turned instantly. The judge, mid-sentence, paused and raised an eyebrow. The officers stiffened, their eyes darting between the girl and the dog. And Rex, well-trained as he was, froze for just a moment, sensing the sudden surge of attention. For those few seconds, time seemed to stretch unnaturally. Lawyers forgot their notes, spectators held their breath, the judge's gavel remained motionless in midair. The little girl's gesture, so simple and unassuming, had a power that no one had expected. It was as if the room collectively realized that the innocence of a child could disrupt even the most rigid structures of law and order. The juxtaposition of her tiny, delicate hand pointing at the large, disciplined dog created a visual tension that was both amusing and deeply human. In that instant, The courtroom's usual air of authority was softened by something entirely unpredictable: pure, unfiltered curiosity. The mother's heart skipped a beat. She had anticipated awkward glances or perhaps a quiet scolding for her daughter's lack of decorum, but the reaction from the room surprised her. Some spectators chuckled softly, covering their mouths to hide smiles. Others leaned forward, watching intently, captivated by the unfolding scene. Even the judge's stern expression softened for a fraction of a second, his eyes following the girl's pointing finger. There was a fleeting acknowledgement that, in this precise moment, the rules of the courtroom were secondary to the innocence of a child's fascination. Meanwhile, Rex's handler, the officer, assessed the situation with professional calm. Years of training had prepared him for unpredictable circumstances, but this was a new kind of unpredictability, one involving not danger but the innocent curiosity of a toddler. He gave Rex a subtle signal, ensuring the dog remained seated and composed. The German Shepherd's massive body seemed even more imposing in contrast to the tiny hand pointing at him, yet his eyes, calm and intelligent, reflected no threat. There was a quiet understanding between the dog and his handler, a silent communication that allowed the scene to remain safe, yet electrifying in its emotional impact. The courtroom held its collective breath as the girl's excitement escalated. She leaned slightly forward, her voice now a high-pitched squeal of delight, and giggled. "Doggy, doggy," she repeated, pointing again, more insistently this time. The judge cleared his throat gently, attempting to regain decorum, but even he struggled to suppress a smile. The tension in the room had transformed into a gentle warmth, a shared moment of amusement and astonishment. It was rare for a courtroom, often a place of stress, fear, and seriousness, to be united in such a pure emotional response. Spectators began whispering to each other. "Look at that kid," one murmured. "She's fearless." Another added, "And the dog, he's so calm." The whispers spread like wildfire, a human chain reaction of delight. The scene had shifted from a procedural matter into something far more memorable, a story of connection, curiosity, and the unexpected charm of innocence. The little girl had become the unspoken center of attention, not because she was disrupting the proceedings, but because she had reminded everyone present of the simple joys that life often overlooked. For a brief moment the courtroom seemed to pause. Papers remained untouched, pens hovered above notepads, and the usual shuffle of chairs and movement ceased. Every eye, whether belonging to a hardened lawyer, a cautious officer, or a curious spectator, was locked on the tiny girl and the disciplined German Shepherd. There was an unspoken agreement. Something extraordinary was happening, though it was made extraordinary by the simplest of things: a child's curiosity, a dog's training, and the improbable collision of innocence and authority in one room. Even the mother, initially worried about etiquette and propriety, found herself laughing softly, the tension she had carried for hours dissolving entirely. She reached over and gently patted her daughter's hand, her heart swelling with pride and amusement. "Yes, honey," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly with laughter. "That's Rex. Be gentle." The little girl's attention never wavered, her eyes bright with wonder. And for the first time in hours, the courtroom seemed lighter, almost magical, as if the walls themselves recognized the extraordinary in the ordinary. As the moment stretched on, the scene became more than just a fleeting disruption. It became a lesson in presence. In a place dominated by rules, structure, and authority, a simple gesture, pointing at a dog, held the power to unite, amuse, and soften everyone present. The courtroom, typically a theater of tension and deliberation, had become a stage for innocence to shine. And in that singular, unforgettable instant, the 3-year-old girl and the police dog had created a memory that would linger in everyone's mind long after the gavel struck and proceedings resumed. It was a surprising courtroom moment indeed, unexpected, heartwarming, and profoundly human. And little did anyone know, this was only the beginning of a story that would captivate not just the people in the room that morning, but an entire community in the days and weeks to follow. The courthouse stood at the center of the small town, an unassuming brick building with tall columns and a heavy wooden door that had seen generations come and go. Inside, the atmosphere was both formal and faintly intimidating, a combination of old-world architecture and modern administrative efficiency. The courtroom itself was a spacious room lined with polished wooden benches, each one worn by decades of visitors, each one telling stories of lives changed, disputes settled, and justice, or at least the attempt at it, meted out. Sunlight streamed in through tall, arched windows, illuminating the dust motes that danced lazily in the air, giving the room a timeless quality, as though it existed in both the present and the past. That particular morning, the courtroom was unusually crowded. A routine case involving community safety had drawn attention from local residents curious about the police's involvement. On the docket was a minor but important matter. A traffic violation escalated into a legal dispute, and the police K-9 unit had been brought in to demonstrate a key piece of evidence. Officers in crisp blue uniforms moved with purpose, their polished boots clicking against the hardwood floor. Some carried clipboards, others whispered among themselves, and all maintained a demeanor of disciplined attentiveness. Their presence lent the courtroom an air of authority, reminding everyone that law enforcement was both respected and in some ways feared. At the front of the room, a large German shepherd named Rex sat obediently beside his handler. His coat, glossy and well-groomed, shimmered under the sunlight, and his posture was impeccable, head high, chest forward, tail resting calmly. Years of training had taught Rex to obey even the subtlest of commands, to discern the moods and intentions of humans, and to act without hesitation when called upon. Today, however, his role was less about enforcement and more about demonstration. He was to remain a silent, watchful presence, embodying authority while maintaining calm, a living reminder of the law's reach and precision. The spectators reflected a cross-section of the town's population. Elderly couples clutched each other's hands, nodding politely when greeted by officers. Teenagers fidgeted on the edges of benches, smartphones tucked under arms, sneaking glances at the proceedings while pretending to pay attention. Middle-aged business owners adjusted their jackets and whispered quietly, speculating about the outcome of the case. A few parents had brought children, hopping to occupy them for a short while, though they quickly realized that toddlers were far less predictable than anyone imagined. Among them sat the young mother with her 3-year-old daughter, a pair whose presence would soon become the focal point of the entire courtroom. The little girl had spent the first few minutes quietly observing. She was too young to grasp the intricacies of law, to understand the weight of evidence or the significance of testimony. Yet her senses were alive to every detail: the gleam of sunlight on a polished gavel, the rustle of papers, the low hum of conversations held in hushed tones. She noticed the officers' crisp movements, the dogs' steady breathing, and the subtle signals exchanged between the handlers and their companions. To her, it was all fascinating, a dance of adults in a space that seemed both enormous and full of possibility. Her tiny hands clutched a stuffed rabbit, a comforting companion amidst the unfamiliar formalities. Meanwhile, the lawyers prepared their materials with quiet intensity. Notes were shuffled, pens tapped against legal pads, and murmured strategies were exchanged behind closed fists. Their eyes occasionally flicked toward the spectators, gauging reactions, anticipating responses. There was a sense of controlled tension, a quiet pressure that filled the room like an invisible weight. Every individual present was aware of the rules, the order, and the decorum that governed their behavior. Yet beneath that veneer of authority and professionalism, a shared curiosity lingered. Everyone had noticed the child, her small presence a delicate counterpoint to the gravity of their surroundings. The police officer overseeing Rex maintained a vigilant stance, occasionally offering subtle commands in low tones that only the dog could perceive. Rex responded to each signal with practiced precision, demonstrating years of disciplined training. The relationship between handler and dog was a silent symphony, communicated through posture, eye contact, and gentle nudges. The officer had trained for unpredictable scenarios, yet nothing in the manuals could have prepared him for the unpredictability of human curiosity, especially that of a small child. Even the most disciplined dog could react in unexpected ways when faced with the unpredictable energy of innocence. As the case began, the focus of the courtroom gradually shifted between legal proceedings and the unusual presence of the K-9 unit. The officers occasionally referenced Rex in testimony, demonstrating procedures and explaining protocols. Lawyers nodded in appreciation of the evidence, spectators leaned forward with interest, and the judge maintained a watchful eye, ensuring decorum while acknowledging the novelty of the situation. All the while, the little girl's attention wandered, drawn to the gentle rise and fall of Rex's chest, the shine of his coat, and the aura of quiet authority that seemed to emanate from him. Her mother whispered reassurances occasionally, though the girl's fascination was uncontainable. "Look, honey," she murmured softly, "that's Rex, be nice to him." But the toddler was already captivated, her small hands stretching instinctively, fingers twitching with excitement. She pointed occasionally at the dog, but at first it was tentative, almost shy, a gesture born of curiosity rather than boldness. The courtroom, accustomed to formality and restrained behavior, hardly noticed at first. Yet the tiny, repeated movements were enough to begin drawing subtle attention. Whispers and glances began to circulate, a quiet ripple of intrigue. Beyond the immediate space, the courtroom itself seemed almost alive with history. Portraits of past judges lined the walls, staring down with solemn expressions that added weight to the proceedings. The tall windows framed views of the town beyond, the courthouse square, local shops, and people moving through their daily routines. Inside, the polished floors reflected light, creating a sense of continuity, as though countless cases had unfolded in exactly the same patterns over decades. Into this structured, almost sacred space, the presence of a child was a gentle, unpredictable disruption, a reminder that life, with all its surprises, could intrude at any moment. By the time the proceedings were well, the little girl had grown bolder. Her finger would occasionally flick toward Rex, accompanied by small squeals of delight. The officer monitored the interactions with professional calm, noting each subtle signal and ensuring the dog remained steady. Even Rex, who had experienced countless demonstrations and public appearances, seemed momentarily aware of the child's presence. His ears twitched, his head turned slightly, and his intelligent eyes followed her every movement. The quiet connection forming between them, though silent, was palpable, creating an electric tension that infused the room with curiosity and anticipation. The spectators, initially focused on the technicalities of the case, began to notice the unfolding dynamic. Whispers spread like a gentle wind. "Look at the girl," someone murmured. "She's so fearless," another added. The judge, maintaining his role as arbiter of law, allowed a subtle smile to cross his features, though he continued the proceedings with measured authority. Even the lawyers, usually locked into strategy and procedure, found themselves stealing glances, momentarily distracted from the complexities of legal argument. It was rare for a courtroom to be united in attention for anything beyond the case itself. Yet here, innocence had captured the collective focus. By mid-morning, the unusual energy in the courtroom had shifted the entire mood. What began as a routine legal matter had transformed into a shared human experience. The combination of the little girl's curiosity, her mother's gentle guidance, the officer's watchful care, and Rex's disciplined calm had created a scene that felt both magical and real. The room, usually filled with the weight of authority, had softened, allowing laughter, smiles, and wonder to quietly coexist with legal proceedings. The child had not only observed her surroundings, she had subtly altered them, leaving an impression that would linger long after the gavel struck and the session ended. This delicate balance of curiosity and discipline would soon reach its peak. The little girl, emboldened by her observations, prepared to take the next step, a gesture that would captivate the courtroom, the media, and eventually the entire town. But at this moment, in the stillness and quiet anticipation of a routine courtroom morning, everyone present was connected by a simple, shared awareness that extraordinary moments often arise from the simplest sources. The room had become a theater, with the child, the dog, and the officers forming the central cast in a story that was only beginning to unfold. The courtroom had settled into a rhythm, the type that comes when legal proceedings follow a familiar pattern. Lawyers spoke in measured tones, officers maintained silent vigilance, and the judge presided with a calm, authoritative air. Yet, amid the formal proceedings, one tiny observer had begun to quietly shift the energy of the room. The 3-year-old girl, seated on her mother's lap, had been watching everything with unblinking curiosity. Her small, round face lit up as her eyes tracked the police dog, Rex, who remained poised at the front of the room, a picture of discipline and alertness. Her fingers twitched with anticipation, the soft grip on her stuffed rabbit loosening slightly. She had been silent for several minutes, quietly observing the subtle interactions between the officers and the dog, noting the faint movements of the handler's hand, the gentle tilt of Rex's ears, and the almost imperceptible signals exchanged between them. To anyone else, these details were ordinary, mundane aspects of a routine demonstration. To her, however, they were fascinating, magical. Each motion was a discovery, each glance a secret code she was eager to interpret. Finally, unable to contain herself any longer, she extended her tiny finger toward Rex. The gesture was tentative at first, almost shy, as if she were testing the waters of authority. "Doggy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The single word, innocent and unassuming, carried a weight she could not have understood. In an instant, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Heads turned. Officers paused mid-step. The judge's gavel froze in midair, as though the universe itself had decided to momentarily suspend its rules. The officer overseeing Rex instinctively took a small step forward, hand raised slightly, ready to intervene if necessary. Years of training had taught him to anticipate unpredictable situations, but he had never encountered anything quite like this. A child's curiosity meeting a police dog's disciplined calm in the midst of a live courtroom proceeding. Rex's massive body remained still, ears perked and eyes alert, yet there was no aggression, no hint of threat. The dog's training had prepared him for danger, but in this moment the challenge was subtler, maintaining composure in the face of innocent fascination. The spectators, initially focused on the procedural elements of the case, began to shift their attention. A murmur rippled quietly through the room, almost imperceptible at first, then growing into a wave of whispered commentary. "Look at her," someone said softly. "She's not scared at all." Another added, "And the dog, he's so calm. Amazing." Even the judge, whose life had been filled with countless interruptions and distractions, allowed a small, amused smile to cross his features. The formal rigidity of the courtroom had softened, replaced by a shared curiosity and gentle amusement. Encouraged by the subtle reactions of those around her, the little girl pointed again, this time with more determination. Her small voice rang out clearly, "Doggy." She leaned slightly forward, eyes wide and sparkling with delight. There was no fear in her gesture, no hesitation. It was a pure expression of fascination, the kind only a child could convey. Her mother, sensing the growing attention, whispered gently, "Be gentle, honey." But the girl was already fully absorbed in her own world, unaware of the effect she was having on the adults around her. Rex, the dog, responded in a manner that seemed almost cinematic in its timing. He tilted his head slightly, his intelligent eyes locking onto the girl's finger. For a moment, he remained perfectly still, studying this tiny human who dared to invade his personal space with nothing but curiosity and trust. Then, almost imperceptibly, he shifted his weight, leaning slightly forward but remaining seated, demonstrating a perfect balance of discipline and responsiveness. The subtle movement drew a collective exhale from the spectators, a silent acknowledgement of the delicate trust forming between child and dog. The officers nearby exchanged quiet glances. Years of training had taught them to expect unpredictability, but the unpredictability of innocence was something else entirely. This was a scenario where no protocols existed, where manuals offered no guidance. And yet, the professionalism and control they had cultivated allowed them to trust Rex completely, confident that his calm demeanor would guide the interaction safely. Even as whispers of amusement and astonishment filled the room, the officer's calm presence reinforced a sense of security that allowed the moment to unfold naturally. The courtroom seemed to lean in collectively. Lawyers paused mid-sentence, legal pads temporarily forgotten. Spectators adjusted their positions, craning their necks to witness the interaction. Even the judge, who had presided over hundreds of cases with impeccable decorum, allowed his gaze to soften, watching the tiny girl and the massive dog with genuine curiosity. It was rare for the courtroom to be so united in attention, so captivated by a single, unfolding event. And yet here it was, the intersection of innocence, discipline, and sheer unpredictability, creating a moment that felt almost sacred. The little girl's finger wavered slightly as she pointed again, this time more insistently. "Doggy, hi," she squealed, a note of excitement threading through her words. The sound, so pure and unfiltered, seemed to resonate in the high-ceilinged room, cutting through the low hum of adult conversation. Spectators smiled, some whispered quietly to each other, and a few couldn't suppress soft laughter. It was as if the energy of the child had begun to transform the courtroom itself, turning a space of legal formality into a theater of human emotion and connection. The mother's hands rested lightly on her daughter's shoulders, guiding without restraining. She whispered soft reassurances, but mostly allowed the child to explore this small adventure, sensing that the moment was both fragile and extraordinary. The child's focus was unwavering. She had discovered a new kind of magic, the silent communication between a human and an animal trained in obedience and trust. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a joyful curiosity that seemed to radiate outward, affecting everyone present. Rex responded with the same calm intelligence that had earned him years of accolades as a police dog. He remained seated, ears flicking occasionally, eyes tracking the girl's movements with careful attention. When she wiggled slightly to get a better view, he leaned subtly, acknowledging her presence without breaking the disciplined stance expected in a courtroom. The synchronization of curiosity and discipline, innocence and training, created a delicate balance that fascinated everyone. No one moved, no one spoke, everyone watched as this quiet drama unfolded in real time. As the girl continued to point, small giggles escaping her lips, the tension that had initially filled the room began to dissipate. The officers relaxed slightly, confident in Rex's composure. Spectators' curiosity shifted from cautious interest to full engagement, smiles spreading across faces. Even the judge, maintaining his dignity, allowed a gentle nod to the girl, an acknowledgement of her unexpected role in lightening the formal atmosphere. The courtroom, usually a place of rigid hierarchy, had been temporarily transformed by something far more fundamental: the power of innocence to command attention and influence the mood. The whispers grew louder, a ripple spreading through the crowd. "Look at the dog, he's so calm," someone said. "And the girl, she's fearless," another added. The dialogue was quiet, almost conspiratorial, but it carried a shared sense of wonder. Here was a child, completely unaware of the power of her gesture, holding the collective gaze of adults trained to notice, judge, and measure every detail. The girl's innocence had become a subtle form of authority, softening the atmosphere and creating a shared moment of joy and anticipation. The mother watched, half nervous, half amused, as her daughter leaned slightly forward again, eyes sparkling. "Doggy, sit with me," she asked in her small, earnest voice. The words, simple and heartfelt, carried a weight that transcended age or rank. In that moment, the distinction between adult and child, officer and civilian, seemed irrelevant. What mattered was the shared recognition of trust, curiosity, and mutual respect. The little girl, entirely unaware of her influence, had become the center of attention, commanding the gaze and admiration of everyone in the room. Rex responded subtly, tilting his head, shifting slightly closer without leaving his seated position. It was the perfect balance between acknowledging the child and maintaining the professionalism required in the courtroom. Observers were captivated. Some held their breath in anticipation of what might happen next. The room had entered a collective state of fascination, each person silently rooting for the interaction to remain safe, gentle, and extraordinary. Even the judge, often accustomed to interruptions, could not help but allow a hint of warmth into his expression. As minutes stretched, the child's gestures became bolder, her excitement more audible. Each pointing movement was precise, deliberate, yet filled with the unfiltered joy of discovery. Rex's calm demeanor provided a counterbalance, a steady presence that ensured nothing spiraled out of control. The result was a delicate dance, choreographed by instinct, training, and curiosity. The room, silent in collective amazement, had become a witness to a rare moment, a perfect intersection of innocence and discipline, awe and gentle amusement. It was clear that the little girl's actions would be remembered long after the legal proceedings concluded. Her pointing, so simple yet so profound, had transformed a routine courtroom into a stage for wonder. Observers exchanged glances, subtly acknowledging the magic of the moment. For a child, it was play. For the adults, it was a lesson in humility, a reminder that even the most structured, serious environments could be softened by curiosity, innocence, and the unspoken language shared between a child and a dog. And as the girl's finger hovered once more, the courtroom collectively leaned forward, hearts beating a little faster, all eyes fixed on the small hand that had quietly seized control of everyone's attention. In that moment, nothing else mattered. The case, the arguments, the procedures, all faded into the background. There was only her, Rex, and the unfolding story of innocent courage that had turned a mundane courtroom morning into something unforgettable. The courtroom, which had been a model of stoic formality just moments before, began to shift subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. The initial stir caused by the little girl pointing at Rex, the police dog, had evolved into a ripple of shared curiosity. Every person in the room, from the stern judge to the fidgeting spectators, now found their attention divided between the procedural proceedings and the unexpected interaction unfolding in front of them. It was as if the room itself had collectively leaned forward, holding its breath in anticipation of what might happen next. Spectators who had arrived expecting the usual monotony of testimony, evidence presentation, and polite murmurs of discussion now found themselves captivated. Conversations halted mid-word, whispers died on lips, and even the habitual movements of adjusting jackets or tapping pens ceased. People tilted their heads, craning forward in silent fascination, their eyes locked on the small child and the enormous German shepherd. There was an unspoken acknowledgement among them. This was extraordinary. The courtroom, usually governed by rules and protocol, had become a stage for the unexpected, and everyone present was witnessing a rare and delicate drama. The judge, seated high on the bench, adjusted his robes with a faint rustle. His face, usually a mask of stern authority, softened imperceptibly as he followed the girl's gestures. Years of presiding over cases had taught him to expect interruptions, disruptive attorneys, misbehaving defendants, or the occasional loud spectator. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for the innocence and audacity of a 3-year-old. For a fleeting moment, the seriousness of the law receded, replaced by a humanizing pause that reminded everyone that the courtroom was not just a place of procedure, but a space where people, emotions, and moments of beauty could exist alongside legality. Lawyers at the front tables exchanged subtle glances. One attorney, mid-note, lowered his pen and blinked rapidly, as though trying to confirm that what he was witnessing was real. Another, mid-sentence during a recitation of legal precedent, paused, allowing a faint smile to cross his face. Even the normally stoic opposing counsel couldn't help but lean slightly forward, curious to see how the dog would respond to the tiny, insistent finger pointing at him. The courtroom's usual rigid hierarchy, judges above lawyers, lawyers above spectators, seemed to soften as every participant became equally enthralled by the child's innocent engagement. Officers monitoring Rex maintained a professional stance, though subtle shifts betrayed their growing interest. Years of training had taught them to remain vigilant, to anticipate chaos and potential danger, but what they were now witnessing was something neither predictable nor threatening. The dog remained calm, and yet his subtle movements mirrored the tension and attention that now filled the room. His ears twitched, his head tilted slightly, and his eyes locked on the small girl with quiet intelligence. There was an unspoken communication occurring, a silent negotiation of trust and curiosity that captivated everyone observing it. Spectators in the gallery began murmuring to one another, their voices hushed but full of wonder. "She's fearless," one whispered, eyes glued to the child. "And the dog, he's incredible," said another, shaking their head in admiration. The conversation, though quiet, grew into a gentle hum of shared astonishment. Cameras from a local news crew, present to document the routine case, shifted focus. Instead of legal arguments, their lenses captured the delicate interaction between the toddler and the German shepherd, framing a story that would soon capture the hearts of viewers far beyond the courthouse walls. Even the court clerks, usually occupied with recording testimony and managing procedural details, paused, glancing up from their notepads. They exchanged subtle smiles, a mixture of amusement and awe, as they witnessed the extraordinary disruption to the usual monotony of courtroom life. The monotone rhythm of clicking pens, shuffling papers, and low murmurings had been replaced by an almost cinematic tableau, innocence confronting authority, curiosity engaging discipline, and joy meeting stoicism. The balance was delicate, yet perfectly maintained, and the room collectively recognized its rarity. The judge cleared his throat, attempting to regain a sense of decorum, but even his words were tempered by the undeniable charm of the scene. "Let's proceed," he said gently, though his eyes betrayed amusement, flicking repeatedly toward the child. The words carried authority, yet they also acknowledged the reality. This was no ordinary courtroom moment. His attempt to refocus proceedings was met with subtle resistance, not from defiance, but from the sheer magnetic presence of the little girl and her pointed finger. The courtroom had become a stage for innocence, and even the gavel seemed to pause in recognition. As the girl repeated her gestures, each pointing motion more confident than the last, a new dynamic emerged. The courtroom, previously a collection of individuals acting within the bounds of law, became a collective witness to a human drama. Spectators leaned forward, officers stood a fraction taller, lawyers blinked in quiet disbelief, and the judge allowed a fleeting smile. There was no need for words. The moment was self-explanatory, a shared understanding that sometimes the smallest beings could command attention and influence the atmosphere far more than those accustomed to authority. The mother, seated quietly beside her daughter, observed the courtroom's reactions with a mixture of pride and amusement. Her initial anxiety about her daughter's behavior had completely dissolved. Instead, she marveled at the effect her child had on the entire room. Her whispers of guidance, "Be gentle, honey," were now part of a larger narrative unfolding organically. The little girl's innocent gestures had become the catalyst for connection, a bridge between formal authority, disciplined training, and human emotion. For a moment, the mother allowed herself to simply watch, knowing that this was a rare and beautiful experience. Rex, attuned to every subtle cue, continued to respond with disciplined calm. He shifted slightly, adjusting his posture in a way that was imperceptible to most, yet perfectly aligned with the child's movements. His eyes followed her finger, his breathing steady, his demeanor unwavering. The officer monitoring him gave a subtle nod, recognizing the silent communication taking place. There was no chaos, no danger, only a perfect equilibrium of curiosity and composure. The room collectively held its breath, marveling at the balance between instinct and training, innocence and experience. Whispers and murmurs grew in volume, though never breaking the courtroom's essential decorum. Spectators exchanged subtle glances, sharing a quiet delight in the unusual scene. "She's so brave," one person whispered, barely audible. "And the dog, he's amazing," another replied. These shared observations, small yet significant, created a sense of community, a collective acknowledgement that what they were witnessing was remarkable. It was rare for a courtroom, a place of formality and rigid rules, to foster such a spontaneous and genuine human connection. The attorneys, realizing that their meticulously prepared arguments were momentarily secondary to the unfolding interaction, allowed themselves a brief pause. One leaned back in his chair, observing the scene with quiet appreciation. Another smirked, shaking his head as if to say, "Only in this town." Even the judge, whose role demanded impartiality and attention to procedural detail, could not ignore the human drama unfolding before him. There was a subtle recognition that the courtroom, at this precise moment, had become something larger than a legal arena. It was a theater of shared humanity. The murmurs continued, blending into a quiet hum of admiration and astonishment. The child, seemingly oblivious to the effect she had on those around her, leaned slightly forward again, pointing with renewed determination. "Doggy," she squealed, her voice carrying innocence and excitement. The repetition of the gesture, combined with the dog's calm responsiveness, created a rhythm, a silent narrative that everyone in the room instinctively understood. It was as though time itself had slowed, allowing this perfect intersection of curiosity, discipline, and joy to play out without interruption. Even the court reporter, usually focused on transcribing every word, paused briefly to observe. Fingers hovered over the keys, then resumed typing, though with a newfound awareness of the extraordinary tableau before her. The room was alive, vibrant, and united in attention. Each subtle movement, each soft sound, carried weight. The combination of innocence and authority, spontaneity and discipline, had transformed a simple courtroom into a space where human emotion and connection were palpable, almost tangible. The judge attempted once more to guide proceedings back on track, clearing his throat and speaking in measured tones. "Please remain seated," he said gently, though his eyes twinkled with amusement. "We must continue with the case." Yet even his words were tempered by acknowledgement of the moment's significance. The courtroom, previously tense and formal, had been forever altered. Everyone understood that this small, innocent gesture had created a ripple effect, softening, humanizing, and connecting every person present in ways that words alone could not. And so the room remained captivated. The little girl, oblivious to the weight of her influence, continued to point, her excitement infectious. Rex, obedient and calm, responded with subtle cues, maintaining composure and discipline. Spectators, officers, lawyers, and the judge, all participants in this unexpected event, witnessed a moment of rare and profound beauty. It was a reminder that even in spaces dominated by rules and authority, innocence, curiosity, and trust could transform the atmosphere, leaving an impression that would linger long after the gavel struck. The courtroom, already buzzing with subtle tension and quiet fascination, held its collective breath as the little girl leaned forward once more, her tiny finger pointing at Rex, the police dog. She giggled, high-pitched and melodic, and squealed, "Doggy." The sound, so pure and unassuming, filled the space with a strange warmth that contrasted sharply with the formality of the proceedings. Lawyers, officers, spectators, and even the judge were mesmerized. Everyone waited, uncertain if Rex would react aggressively, curiously, or simply ignore the child. In that moment, the courtroom's usual hierarchy and authority seemed to dissolve, replaced by anticipation and awe. Rex, the German shepherd, sat perfectly still, ears pricked and chest rising and falling in calm rhythm. His massive head tilted slightly as he observed the child, his dark, intelligent eyes tracking her fingers' every movement. There was no tension in his posture, no hint of aggression, only curiosity and trained awareness. The officer overseeing him shifted slightly, giving a subtle hand signal that went unnoticed by the crowd but conveyed reassurance to Rex. Years of disciplined training had prepared the dog for dangerous situations, unpredictable crowds, and threatening individuals. Yet nothing in the manual could have prepared him, or his handler, for the unpredictable innocence of a 3-year-old child. The girl, unaware of the scrutiny she had provoked, leaned forward again. Her excitement was palpable, her tiny face lighting up as if she were about to discover a secret only she could see. "Come here, doggy," she squeaked. Her voice carried a mix of curiosity, courage, and complete trust. The room seemed to pause, every sound, the rustle of papers, the distant tick of a clock, muted by collective attention. Even the judge, poised above the proceedings, appeared to hold his breath, waiting to see how the massive dog would respond to the smallest visitor in the courtroom. Then, with a subtle shift, Rex did something remarkable. His massive body leaned slightly forward, but he remained seated, a controlled and deliberate movement that suggested curiosity without threat. The slight lean brought his head closer to the girl's pointing finger, his intelligent eyes locking with hers in what could only be described as silent communication. The officer monitored every nuance, subtly signaling reassurance to the dog, while spectators gasped softly, their fascination growing. It was as though Rex, the trained enforcer of law and discipline, had recognized something fundamental in the child, a shared innocence, a gentle curiosity that demanded respect. The girl's giggles grew louder, her excitement infectious. She waved her free hand, pointing again and squealing, "Hi, doggy, you're so big." The courtroom's collective reaction intensified. Whispers and murmurs spread through the room, creating a soft hum of shared astonishment and amusement. Spectators leaned forward, some clutching their hands to stifle laughter, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Even the lawyers momentarily paused their arguments, captivated by the subtle, silent dialogue between child and dog. The judge allowed a faint smile, his stern expression softened, recognizing the rare human moment that had overtaken his court. The officer overseeing Rex adjusted his posture slightly, aware that even the slightest misstep could disrupt the delicate balance. But the dog remained impeccable. His ears flicked in response to subtle sounds, his eyes never leaving the child, and his massive frame exuded calm authority. He inched forward ever so slightly, not in obedience to the girl, but in recognition of her confidence and curiosity. The subtle motion was mesmerizing. It demonstrated the incredible bond between handler and dog, as well as the dog's innate intelligence, allowing him to navigate a scenario never encountered before. A toddler in a formal courtroom environment asserting attention with nothing but innocence. Spectators began whispering more audibly. "He's so calm," one woman murmured, eyes wide. "I can't believe how gentle he is," said a man beside her, leaning forward on the edge of the bench. Cameras from the local news crew captured the moment with precision, focusing on the juxtaposition of the tiny child's exuberance and the dog's controlled composure. Each frame told a story of trust, curiosity, and the unexpected humanizing effect of innocence in an otherwise rigid environment. The courtroom, though designed for order and authority, had become a theater for an extraordinary, unscripted event. The little girl's fascination deepened. She leaned forward, her voice rising with excitement as she squeaked again, "Come on, doggy, sit with me." Her hands reached out instinctively, attempting to bridge the gap between her small world and the disciplined presence before her. The gesture was bold yet innocent, daring yet trusting. And in response, Rex did something that would etch this moment into the memories of all present. He moved closer. Slowly, deliberately, he shifted his massive frame, lowering his head slightly and taking a measured step toward the girl, while never breaking the calmness expected of a trained K9 in a formal courtroom. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Spectators instinctively leaned forward, their eyes wide, whispering in awe. "Did you see that?" one spectator exclaimed quietly. "He's actually moving toward her," another whispered, "and he's still calm. It's incredible." The officer monitoring Rex gave a barely perceptible nod, ensuring the dog's movement was controlled, measured, and safe. Every detail, from the tilt of the dog's head to the flick of his ears, conveyed a story of intelligence, awareness, and trust, and the courtroom collectively recognized the extraordinary nature of what was unfolding before them. The girl's eyes sparkled with delight as she extended her small hands, her body leaning slightly forward in anticipation. "Sit with me, doggy, please," she squeaked, giggling uncontrollably. The officer maintained a steady hand on Rex, ready to intervene if necessary, but trust in the dog's disciplined training allowed the moment to unfold organically. Rex's massive body shifted slightly more, lowering himself carefully to align with the girl's reach. He remained seated, his movements slow and deliberate, ensuring both safety and connection. Every spectator could feel the tension ease, replaced by a growing sense of wonder and warmth. The judge, momentarily forgetting the formal proceedings, allowed himself a small smile, nodding ever so slightly toward the child. Lawyers, too, stole glances, their arguments momentarily paused as they watched the silent dialogue between innocence and discipline. The courtroom, filled with adults accustomed to rules, structure, and authority, had been captivated by something entirely different. A demonstration of trust, understanding, and the surprising power of a child's curiosity. Every movement, every gesture, every blink contributed to the narrative unfolding silently, yet profoundly in front of them. The murmurs of awe grew louder as the interaction continued. Spectators whispered to one another, exchanging glances of admiration. "She's so brave," one parent murmured. "And the dog, he's remarkable," another replied. Even the court reporter, fingers hovering over the keyboard, paused momentarily, documenting not just proceedings, but the extraordinary scene taking place before her. The balance between discipline and innocence, authority and trust, created a dynamic that held everyone's attention. This wasn't just a fleeting distraction. It was an event, a rare moment of connection that transcended the courtroom's usual confines. The little girl, now emboldened by Rex's gentle response, reached out slightly with her hands, her giggles ringing through the room. She was careful yet curious, cautious yet confident. Every motion she made was a testament to trust in the unseen, the unspoken, the quiet assurance that this large, powerful animal meant no harm. And Rex, the well-trained officer's companion, mirrored that trust with a calm intelligence, acknowledging her presence without compromising his discipline. The scene was a delicate balance, an unspoken choreography of innocence and professionalism, unfolding organically in a courtroom unaccustomed to such warmth. Spectators leaned forward even further, silent admiration spreading throughout the room. Cameras captured the moment. Journalists whispered quietly about its uniqueness, and even the judge allowed his usual stern expression to soften further. It was rare to witness something that united everyone in awe, a moment that transcended legal procedure and hierarchy. Here, in this small-town courtroom, a 3-year-old child and a police dog had created a scene that resonated with beauty, simplicity, and human connection, a story that would linger in memory far longer than the case itself. By now, the girl's excitement had reached a peak. She clapped her hands, squealing with laughter, her eyes sparkling as she observed Rex's subtle movements. The dog, attentive and disciplined, responded with careful, deliberate gestures, lowering his massive head slightly closer to her. The bond between them, though silent and unspoken, was palpable. Every movement communicated trust, understanding, and calm. The courtroom had become an audience to a rare and profound interaction, one that transformed the space from a formal legal setting into a theater of wonder and delight. It was clear that this moment would not be forgotten. The child's innocence and curiosity had disrupted the normal rhythm of the courtroom, yet in doing so, it had also elevated the experience for everyone present. The dog's calm and intelligent response had reinforced the power of training, trust, and the subtle understanding between human and animal. Spectators exchanged smiles, whispered in amazement, and quietly acknowledged that they had witnessed something extraordinary, a rare and beautiful intersection of childhood wonder and disciplined authority. And as the little girl's finger hovered in the air, giggling with anticipation, Rex responded with the quiet dignity of a trained professional. His massive frame, calm eyes, and subtle movements told a story as compelling as the child's gestures, a story of trust, respect, and the unexpected magic that occurs when innocence meets discipline. The courtroom, once a place of routine legal procedure, had become a witness to a remarkable, unforgettable interaction, one that would ripple through memory and conversation long after the gavel struck and the formalities resumed. The courtroom, which had earlier been a realm of rigid procedure and muted authority, now thrummed with a quieter, more human energy. What had begun as a simple case had transformed into a subtle, unfolding lesson on the power of innocence and trust. The 3-year-old girl, entirely unaware of her influence, had captivated every person in the room with a few small gestures and the boundless curiosity of her bright, unwavering eyes. Her interaction with Rex, the police dog, had created a ripple effect, shifting the collective mood from tense anticipation to quiet wonder and reflection. As spectators watched, their attention shifted from the legal arguments to the unfolding dynamic before them. The little girl, perched on her mother's lap, extended her tiny hand toward Rex once again, a mixture of determination and gentle trust in her movements. Her voice rang with innocent delight. "Doggy, sit with me," she squeaked, eyes wide with expectation. Rex, trained to respond to cues and commands, mirrored a calm intelligence, inching closer with deliberate composure, maintaining the balance between approachability and discipline. The scene created a tableau of trust in its form, a silent dialogue that no words could replicate. Whispers swept through the spectators. "It's incredible how fearless she is," murmured one woman, leaning closer to her companion. "And the dog, he's so gentle," another responded, shaking their head in admiration. The murmurs were more than commentary, they were reflections of a shared realization. Here was a child, small, vulnerable, and yet utterly confident in her curiosity, demonstrating a fearless openness to the world. And here was a creature, trained for authority and vigilance, responding with calm patience, trust, and intelligence. The interplay between the two revealed lessons that extended far beyond the courtroom walls. The judge, who had observed the unfolding interaction with a mixture of curiosity and restrained amusement, leaned slightly forward in his seat. His expression, usually reserved and formal, softened. He recognized that this simple moment carried profound meaning. The rigid formality of law had been momentarily softened by the raw, unfiltered innocence of a child, paired with the quiet, disciplined presence of a trained animal. There was a lesson here, one that transcended legal principles. The power of trust, empathy, and understanding could transform even the strictest, most structured environments. The officers observing Rex remained vigilant, but even they could not deny the emotional resonance of the moment. Years of experience had taught them to anticipate danger, to respect hierarchy, and to act with discipline, yet they found themselves quietly captivated. The dog's subtle responses, tilting his head, inching closer without breaking composure, illustrated a trust so deep it required no words. The girl's gestures were equally instructive, demonstrating that innocence, curiosity, and vulnerability could command attention and respect in ways authority alone never could. Spectators exchanged glances, absorbing the scene with a mix of admiration and reflection. "It's amazing how much we can learn from children," one whispered. Another nodded, eyes soft with emotion. For a moment, the courtroom became less a place of judgment and procedure and more a living classroom, where the lessons of humanity were being taught silently, through the unspoken interactions of a small child and a large, intelligent animal. Each participant, regardless of age or role, was absorbing the quiet teaching, that innocence and trust can be as powerful as authority and knowledge. The little girl, seemingly oblivious to the effect she was having, continued to giggle and reach toward Rex. She leaned forward, her tiny hands stretched with an expectation born not of entitlement, but of pure curiosity and wonder. Her mother's gentle guidance, whispers of caution and encouragement, reminded her to be careful, yet never stifled the expression of her joy. The balance of freedom and gentle supervision allowed the child to navigate her curiosity safely, creating a moment of learning that extended far beyond the immediate interaction. Rex, observing and responding with disciplined calm, reinforced the lesson. His movements, subtle yet deliberate, demonstrated an understanding that went beyond training, an empathy cultivated through experience and the quiet guidance of his handler. He allowed the girl to approach, to gesture, to express curiosity, while maintaining the control necessary in a formal environment. This silent partnership, an intersection of human and animal trust, captivated every observer, showing that patience, attentiveness, and respect for innocence could produce moments of connection that authority alone could never achieve. Spectators began to reflect more broadly on what they were witnessing. Lawyers, usually focused on procedure and argument, found themselves quietly considering the value of empathy in human interaction. Officers, trained to assess risk and maintain order, observed how restraint, patience, and attentiveness could foster trust even in the most structured circumstances. Even the judge, who had devoted decades to the administration of justice, allowed himself to ponder the subtle yet powerful lessons of the moment. That humanity, compassion, and trust were as important as rules, evidence, and verdicts. The courtroom's energy shifted subtly but unmistakably. Where tension had dominated, a quiet warmth now prevailed. The little girl's innocent gestures had humanized the room, creating a shared understanding among all present. The lesson was not only about trust between child and animal, but about the ways in which openness, vulnerability, and courage can inspire others. Each observer, consciously or unconsciously, absorbed the idea that the world could be approached with curiosity and gentleness, even in environments defined by authority and expectation. Whispers of admiration continued to circulate among spectators. "It's incredible how a child can teach us so much," one parent murmured softly. "And the dog is such a perfect response," another added. The murmurs carried the recognition that the lessons being learned were subtle yet enduring. Authority, discipline, and structure were essential in a courtroom, but so too were patience, empathy, and the ability to respond to trust with respect. The unfolding scene demonstrated that the human capacity to connect, whether with a child, an animal, or each other, was far more powerful than any procedural expertise alone. The mother, watching her daughter interact with the dog, felt a profound sense of pride and humility. She realized that her child, with no understanding of procedure or consequence, was teaching a lesson far greater than any legal argument presented that morning. In her tiny gestures, laughter, and fearless curiosity, she had reminded everyone present of the transformative power of innocence and trust. The mother's heart swelled with a mixture of joy and awe, understanding that this was a rare and beautiful moment that would be remembered by all who witnessed it. Rex, fully aware of the subtleties of the interaction, responded with measured precision. He inched slightly closer, allowing the child's hand to approach, then paused, maintaining the balance between approachability and discipline. His calm, intelligent gaze met hers, forming a silent understanding. There was no fear, no aggression, only acknowledgement. The dog's behavior, the lessons of training, trust, and empathy, an unspoken conversation that every observer could feel but could not articulate fully. The lesson of innocence, mirrored by the dog's discipline, resonated deeply. Spectators found themselves reflecting on their own lives, relationships, and assumptions. They recognized that moments of vulnerability, courage, and curiosity could create connections more profound than rigid authority or strict compliance. The courtroom, typically a space defined by structure and hierarchy, had become a place of learning about human values, the power of trust, and the universality of empathy. Each gesture from the child and each measured response from the dog became symbolic, a reminder that the most profound lessons often come from the simplest interactions. The little girl clapped her hands in delight, giggling as Rex remained calm, his massive body a study in composure. She leaned forward once more, squeaking, "Doggy, I like you." Her words, innocent and heartfelt, resonated through the room. The courtroom collectively responded, hearts warmed by the simplicity of the statement. Lawyers glanced at one another, spectators exchanged quiet smiles, and the judge allowed himself a faint, approving nod. The lesson was clear. Trust, kindness, and courage are universally recognized, regardless of age, size, or status. The moment continued to unfold, a delicate balance between curiosity and discipline, between innocence and experience. Each participant in the room, consciously or unconsciously, absorbed the teaching embedded in the interaction. The child's fearless gestures and joyful exclamations illustrated the power of authenticity, while Rex's composed responses demonstrated the importance of patience, attentiveness, and respect. Together, they created a lesson that transcended the immediate situation, offering insight into the human condition and the value of trust, empathy, and understanding. As the interaction reached its gentle climax, the courtroom was unified in a shared, unspoken acknowledgement. This was more than a fleeting distraction. It was a profound demonstration of the ways in which innocence and trust can influence, soften, and even elevate those around us. Each observer, from the seasoned judge to the law clerk, carried within them the quiet realization that simple gestures, pointing, reaching out, smiling, can hold transformative power. In that courtroom, amidst the echoes of authority, a 3-year-old child and a trained police dog had created a lesson that would resonate far beyond the morning's proceedings. The courtroom slowly returned to the rhythm of normal proceedings, yet something intangible had shifted. The day's case, once a routine legal matter, now seemed secondary to the extraordinary interaction that had just unfolded. The 3-year-old girl, her curiosity satisfied for the moment, clung to her mother's hand, eyes still sparkling from the excitement. Rex, the police dog, remained seated nearby, his massive frame a study in calm intelligence, responding only to subtle cues from his handler. Yet the echoes of what had occurred, trust, innocence, and connection, lingered in the air, leaving an indelible impression on everyone present. As the judge resumed speaking, guiding the courtroom back into formal proceedings, he did so with a noticeable gentleness. His voice carried the weight of authority but also a new warmth, a subtle acknowledgement that the morning's events had humanized the space in ways that extended beyond legal protocols. Lawyers returned to their arguments, officers observed quietly, and spectators leaned back slightly, but the energy in the room had changed. There was a lingering sense of shared understanding, a recognition that all had witnessed something rare, meaningful, and unforgettable. Once the formalities concluded and the gavel struck, signaling the temporary adjournment of the session, the courtroom gradually emptied. Spectators lingered, discussing in hushed tones the events that had just transpired. Conversations focused less on the legal intricacies of the case and more on the remarkable interaction between child and dog. "Can you believe it?" whispered one observer. "The little girl so fearless." Another nodded, eyes wide with wonder. "And the dog, calm, intelligent." Amazing. The shared amazement created a sense of community, a subtle bond forged through witnessing something extraordinary together. The officers overseeing Rex allowed themselves a moment of quiet reflection as well. Years of training had prepared them for tense situations, for confrontation, for maintaining authority under pressure. But the unpredictability of human innocence had offered a lesson that no manual or protocol could provide. The dog's response, disciplined yet gentle, reinforced the value of patience, attentiveness, and trust. Both officers and spectators recognized that the child had, in her own small way, created a moment of harmony, bridging the gap between authority and vulnerability with nothing more than curiosity and openness. News of the incident spread quickly through the courthouse and the small town beyond. Staff members who had not been present in the courtroom sought out those who had witnessed the event, eager to hear first-hand accounts. Whispers of admiration and astonishment traveled through hallways and offices. "Did you hear about the girl and the K9?" one clerk asked another. "They say the dog moved closer to her. It was incredible," came the reply. Even in administrative corners of the courthouse, where the pace of work was usually mechanical, the story sparked smiles and conversations, reminding everyone that the human element could bring unexpected moments of beauty into structured routines. Local media caught wind of the story almost immediately. Reporters arrived, cameras in tow, seeking to capture the unlikely tale that had unfolded in the courtroom. Footage focused on Rex's calm demeanor, the girl's fearless gestures, and the reactions of the spectators and officers. Journalists interviewed parents and courthouse staff, each recounting the scene with astonishment and warmth. Headlines soon appeared: "Toddler wins hearts of courthouse with police-dog interaction," or "Innocence meets authority. Child and K9 captivate courtroom." The story, simple yet profound, resonated deeply with readers, emphasizing the universal power of trust, courage, and human connection. The mother, initially hesitant to allow her daughter into the public eye, soon found herself reflecting on the broader significance of the incident. She realized that her child's small actions had taught lessons far beyond curiosity. The story had reminded adults, accustomed to rules, deadlines, and authority, of the value of openness, trust, and patience. The toddler had inadvertently become a symbol of innocence's transformative power, demonstrating that even the smallest among us could command attention, inspire respect, and soften hearts with nothing more than fearless curiosity and gentle engagement. Rex, the police dog, received recognition in his own quiet way. Officers praised his calm demeanor and precise responses, acknowledging the subtle intelligence and empathy that had guided him through the unpredictable scenario. The handler recounted the moment to colleagues, emphasizing how the dog had maintained discipline while responding to the child's gestures with careful attentiveness. It was a reminder to all law enforcement personnel present that training, empathy, and understanding could coexist, even in high-stakes environments, producing outcomes that were both safe and emotionally profound. The courtroom staff, too, reflected on the incident with quiet pride. They recognized that their role extended beyond procedural support. They were witnesses to a moment that had transcended the ordinary boundaries of their work. Clerks, bailiffs, and administrative assistants recounted the story to colleagues, emphasizing how the child's innocence and the dog's intelligence had created a rare moment of shared humanity. The tale became a touchstone within the courthouse, a story to be told repeatedly, a reminder that every day could hold the potential for extraordinary experiences. Even the judge found himself reflecting deeply on the lesson imparted that day. Years of presiding over cases, dealing with disputes, and maintaining order had instilled a sense of gravitas, discipline, and procedural rigor. Yet, watching a child fearlessly interact with a massive, disciplined police dog had illuminated something profound: that authority and empathy, discipline and openness, could coexist in ways that enriched human experience. The incident would remain with him as a reminder that even in formal, structured environments, moments of genuine connection could occur, touching hearts and minds unexpectedly. Word of the event spread beyond the courthouse. Townspeople recounted the story at gatherings, sharing the moment with neighbors, friends, and family. Social media posts highlighted the video footage, showing the girl pointing fearlessly at Rex and the dog responding with calm intelligence. The story's appeal was universal. It combined courage, innocence, and a touch of suspense in a real-life setting. People connected with the narrative because it represented something fundamental about human experience: the ability of trust, empathy, and curiosity to create bonds and leave lasting impressions. Community leaders, too, recognized the value of the incident. Local police departments cited the interaction as a demonstration of the importance of training, trust, and public engagement. Schools and child development specialists used the story to illustrate lessons about empathy, courage, and the transformative power of small, intentional gestures. The child, through her fearless curiosity and trust, had become a symbol of how innocence could influence and inspire adults, reshaping perceptions and fostering deeper connections between people, animals, and institutions. For the little girl herself, the recognition was secondary. She continued to explore her world with the same fearless curiosity, unaware that her actions had created ripples far beyond her immediate surroundings. To her, pointing at Rex had been an act of fascination and fun, a simple interaction with a creature she admired. Yet the adults around her recognized the depth of the moment, understanding that it was an extraordinary lesson in humility, trust, and the unspoken power of innocence. The story would live on, not only in news coverage, but in the memories of everyone present in the courtroom that day. The local community embraced the story as a shared point of pride and reflection. Parents recounted it to their children, emphasizing the bravery, curiosity, and kindness exhibited by the toddler. Officers discussed the event in training sessions, highlighting the importance of empathy and observation alongside traditional law enforcement skills. Teachers used the story to illustrate lessons in social-emotional learning, demonstrating how simple acts of trust and kindness could have profound effects. The narrative, though born from a brief, unscripted event, resonated deeply, illustrating the universal value of innocence and understanding. As the days passed, the mother reflected on the unexpected reach of the incident. Her child's small gestures had initiated something far larger than anyone could have predicted. They had inspired conversations about empathy, human connection, and the importance of nurturing curiosity and trust in children. The story reminded the community that even in formal, structured environments, like a courthouse, humanity, patience, and openness could transform experiences, creating memorable moments that transcend rules and authority. Rex, though unaware of the accolades, continued to serve faithfully in the K-9 unit. Yet even among his fellow officers, the story of that morning became legendary. It was a reminder that his intelligence, discipline, and capacity for empathy had not only fulfilled his professional duties, but had also facilitated a rare, unforgettable interaction that touched the hearts of an entire courtroom. The incident highlighted the profound relationship that can exist between humans and animals, demonstrating how understanding and trust can bridge differences in size, age, and experience. Ultimately, the aftermath of that extraordinary courtroom moment extended far beyond the immediate participants. The little girl, through her fearless innocence and genuine curiosity, had created a ripple effect of admiration, reflection, and recognition. Adults in the room, lawyers, judges, officers, and spectators, absorbed lessons about humility, trust, and empathy. The town embraced the story as a reminder of the unexpected beauty that can emerge from small, courageous acts. And Rex, the calm and disciplined police dog, had demonstrated the quiet power of intelligence, patience, and attentiveness, completing a scene that would be remembered and recounted for years to come. The legacy of that day was clear. In a world often dominated by rules, procedures, and authority, the smallest acts of curiosity and trust can leave the deepest impressions. A 3-year-old child pointing at a dog had reminded everyone that innocence has the power to teach, inspire, and transform, bridging gaps between age, authority, and experience. And in the echoes of the courthouse, through whispers, smiles, and reflections, the story endured, a testament to the timeless lesson that trust, empathy, and courage, no matter how small, can resonate far beyond their immediate moment. The small courtroom, once defined by the weight of procedure and authority, had become a place of enduring memory. Weeks had passed since the incident with the 3-year-old girl and Rex, the police dog, yet its impact continued to ripple through the town, the courthouse, and beyond. People spoke of it in hushed, awed tones, sharing the story with friends, neighbors, and family members. The tiny gesture, a simple pointing finger, had become a symbol of trust, curiosity, and the unexpected power of innocence to influence the world around us. The mother watched her daughter, smiling gently as the child played in the backyard, pointing at every passing dog with the same fearless curiosity that had captivated the courtroom. She marveled at how a small, innocent action could carry such far-reaching consequences. It was a lesson she herself would carry for life, that courage and curiosity, no matter the age or size of the individual, could bridge gaps and inspire awe. The child had, unknowingly, created a story that resonated far beyond a single day, a story that reminded everyone of the extraordinary power of simple gestures. At the courthouse, the tale became part of local lore. Lawyers told it to each other over coffee breaks, narrating the child's fearless approach and Rex's calm, intelligent response. Judges mentioned it in chambers as a gentle reminder that humanity often exists in the smallest, most unassuming moments. Clerks and bailiffs shared it with new staff, emphasizing that their roles, while procedural, often positioned them as witnesses to profound human experiences. The story had transformed from a single moment into a collective memory, a shared lesson about empathy, patience, and the unexpected influence of innocence. Local news coverage had amplified the story even further. Clips of the girl pointing at Rex circulated widely on social media, garnering thousands of shares, comments, and reactions. People from across the state, and even beyond, marveled at the sight of a fearless child interacting with a disciplined police dog in a place usually reserved for authority and procedure. The narrative captivated audiences because it was relatable yet extraordinary, reminding viewers that bravery and curiosity are not limited by age, and that trust can create remarkable connections in the most unlikely circumstances. The police department, recognizing the unique nature of the event, decided to honor Rex in a special way. His handler wrote a detailed report recounting the incident, highlighting the dog's exceptional calmness, intelligence, and ability to respond to the unexpected. Rex received commendation within the department, not just for his service, but for exemplifying the profound bond that can exist between humans and animals. Officers discussed the incident in training sessions, emphasizing how discipline, attentiveness, and empathy could coexist to produce outcomes that were both safe and emotionally meaningful. Teachers in the community also embraced the story as a teaching moment. Classrooms discussed the lessons embedded in the interaction, the courage to approach the unknown, the value of patience, and the strength found in trust. Children listened with wide eyes, inspired by the notion that even a tiny person could have a profound effect on the world around them. The story transcended its setting, moving from the courthouse to homes, schools, and workplaces, illustrating the universality of the lessons learned. Innocence, curiosity, and empathy were highlighted as tools for connection and understanding, showing that even small gestures could carry great significance. In the girl's family, the incident became a cherished memory. The mother often recounted the story at family gatherings, emphasizing the courage and curiosity of her daughter and the remarkable composure of Rex. Friends and relatives were amazed at the ripple effect of such a simple act. The tale became a cornerstone of family storytelling, a reminder that moments of innocence could leave lasting impressions, and that courage and trust, no matter how small, have the power to touch lives far beyond their immediate sphere. Even the child herself, though unaware of her growing fame, began to exhibit a quiet confidence that reflected her fearless approach to the world. She approached new situations with curiosity and excitement, unafraid to explore and discover. Her gestures, once simple acts of play, now carried the subtle echoes of a story that had reached countless people. While she did not understand the full impact of her actions, those around her recognized that her fearlessness and openness had taught valuable lessons about courage, empathy, and the significance of small, intentional gestures. The local community embraced the story as a symbol of shared humanity. Residents reflected on how a moment of innocence could disrupt expectations, soften hearts, and unite people in quiet wonder. Conversations at cafes, libraries, and parks often circled back to the girl and Rex, illustrating the enduring power of the incident. It had become more than a story. It was a moral compass, guiding adults and children alike to remember the value of curiosity, trust, and kindness in their interactions with the world. The courthouse itself retained a sense of quiet reverence for the event. Judges, lawyers, and staff who had witnessed it carried the memory forward, often reflecting on it during mundane or challenging days. It served as a reminder that even in environments governed by rules, deadlines, and strict authority, humanity could prevail through simple acts of innocence, courage, and trust. The tiny girl's gesture had transformed not only the atmosphere of that day, but the collective consciousness of everyone who had been present, leaving an imprint that would endure for years. Rex, continuing his service in the K-9 unit, became a symbol of the delicate balance between discipline and empathy. His calm, intelligent response to a child's innocent gesture was recounted repeatedly within the department and the community. Officers admired his ability to maintain composure, understanding that true discipline included attentiveness, patience, and respect for trust. The story demonstrated that even creatures trained for authority and vigilance could convey profound lessons about empathy, collaboration, and the subtle power of kindness. The incident also inspired a broader discussion about the ways in which children influence adults. Educators, psychologists, and community leaders reflected on how innocence and curiosity could teach lessons often overlooked by the structured routines of adult life. The girl's fearless pointing at Rex reminded everyone that courage is not measured by size or experience, and that trust can form bridges in moments of uncertainty. Her actions became an example of how the simplest gestures could inspire profound insight, touching hearts and reshaping perspectives. Months later, the story continued to resonate. Local media revisited it, highlighting the enduring lessons of trust, courage, and empathy. Community leaders organized workshops for children and adults to explore similar interactions, emphasizing the importance of nurturing curiosity and understanding. The courtroom incident became a reference point, demonstrating how an ordinary setting could transform into a space of learning and human connection. Even those who had not witnessed it firsthand felt the ripple effects, inspired by the narrative of a tiny gesture creating lasting change. The mother often reflected on the profound simplicity of the moment. Her daughter's pointing finger, guided only by curiosity and fearless innocence, had achieved something extraordinary. It reminded her, and everyone who heard the story, that life often presents opportunities to connect, inspire, and influence through small acts. The child had unknowingly shown that courage and curiosity are not bound by age, and that trust and empathy, extended freely, have the power to transform even the most structured environments. In time, the story of the girl and Rex became legendary in the town and surrounding communities. Children retold it in schools, adults shared it with colleagues, and the courthouse itself preserved the memory as a quiet but powerful reminder of humanity's potential. The tiny gesture, a pointing finger, had created a lasting legacy, demonstrating that even the smallest actions born from innocence and trust can echo far beyond their initial moment, touching countless lives and inspiring generations to come. Years later, the girl, now older, would hear the story retold countless times. Friends, teachers, and community members would recount her fearless interaction with Rex, emphasizing the lessons it imparted about curiosity, empathy, and trust. She would smile, perhaps not fully understanding at the time the magnitude of her actions, yet she would recognize that her simple gesture had left an enduring mark on the world. The courtroom, the dog, the spectators, All had become part of a story that celebrated the profound impact of innocence and courage. And so the legacy endured. The small act of pointing, a moment of fearless curiosity by a 3-year-old child, had transformed not just a courtroom but an entire community. It became a story of inspiration, teaching lessons about trust, empathy, and the quiet power of innocence. Rex's calm response, the spectators' awe, and the shared humanity of the courtroom created a narrative that would resonate for years. In the end, it was a reminder that sometimes the tiniest gestures carry the greatest significance, and that courage, trust, and curiosity have the power to leave an indelible mark on the hearts of all who witness them.